I think that, as you said, it's an often regulated market. If you would take US versus any Asian country or European country, different framework. And you gotta manage risk during all stages, starting with when you recruit the partner, and then at every stage when you're delivering to your client. Paid advertising like Google Ads, Meta is very restrictive. It's not available in all territory. You launch and then 3 days later, your ad account gets blocked. There are two factors in your relationship with clients. There's this trust and there's value delivery. If you don't have these two components, then there's no relationship. If there's no relationship, everything that you're doing right now with the partner is temporary, 100%.
Welcome to another episode of eCoffee with Experts. I'm your host, Austin Willman. I'm here today with Justinas Becius, and he is the CEO of Fortis Media, a digital marketing agency specializing in search, paid, and affiliate marketing for businesses aiming to grow their online visibility and performance. We'll talk a lot about iGaming today, and I'm just going to let Justinas actually fill us in on the details. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Austin.
You're very welcome. You have over 10 years of experience in online gaming and technology industries. What kind of got you into marketing for those niches?
That's an interesting question, actually, because for almost 10 years, I was working in corporate and iGaming sector. Some people call it online gambling as well. And I had few roles, and then our company was sold to what is today Flutter, the largest online gambling company in the world with brands like FanDuel and others. And during my career, I noticed that in the agency space, we were hiring a lot of agencies at the time. There is no agency that could properly cater to this particular segment. And that encouraged me to just start Fortis Media back in 2018.
Yeah, I mean, you saw an opportunity in the marketplace. I'm sure iGaming has some unique challenges when it comes to marketing them. It's probably, we would consider it like a gray market. There are regulations behind it. I guess now, since 2018 until now, you've probably seen or maybe even realized that there maybe are more agencies in the space than you originally anticipated. I'm curious, what do you see as mistakes that other agencies are making in this niche when they're trying to, market for iGaming? And then I have a follow-up question to that. But yeah, what mistakes do you see in this niche?
Well, I think that, as you said, it's an often regulated market, and because we work globally, that regulation is different, and it's very, very different across different regions. If you would take US versus any Asian country or European country, different frameworks, and I think that regulation is at the very center of it, and you gotta manage risk during all stages, starting with when you recruit the partner, and then at every stage when you're delivering to your client. So that's one. And second is keep doing that because clients will push you for results. They will say, like, let's just get on with it. Where are where are the leads? Where are the players? Let's do this faster. Like, we'll figure this out later. So not giving in and kind of staying the course. I think that these are kind of two important aspects there.
Not giving into the clients who are trying to push you to do things that maybe have higher risk because maybe the client has a higher risk tolerance or maybe less experience in marketing in the niche, so they don't quite know the pitfalls. They don't know the repercussions of doing things a certain way. Do you have any examples of where you just can kind of like outlined the scenario, but is there a specific example that you can think of where you had to stand your ground using your experience as almost like a moat, like a defense, and educating the client like why we shouldn't do something?
Absolutely. And I really like how you describe it, sort of kind of kind of standing for the principles that you
Yeah.
as an agency have, because this will be crucial to your long-term success. But coming back to your question about the example, for instance, a very, very specific one, it's paid advertising. As you know, paid advertising like Google Ads, Meta is very restrictive. It's not available in all territories. Also, even where it is available, you need to go through documentation process, certifications and whatnot. And not each time, there's an appetite from different partners to go through that process, which then you launch and then 3 days later, your ad account gets blocked and then it's much harder to get out from that, of course. as
Mm.
opposed to do it right the first time.
So they're trying to push you to, yeah, like just forego the certifications or kind of like I don't want to say cheat the system, but they're like, there's got to be a faster way.
I don't think it's sort of, there's some improper intent behind it or something. I
Sure.
think the intent behind this is just growing your business. And
Hmm.
we
Yeah.
as agency owners or managers, we are doing the same thing. We want results quickly, we want growth, because that is what we kind of think about every morning.
Yeah. Yeah. The reason for the agency to exist is to produce results to the client, and you have a fiduciary responsibility to do so. So I'd imagine, as a leader in an agency, as a CEO, founder, for our audience, you're going to be put in situations probably every day where you can have the option to take the easy route, and you kind of have to stand your ground because like the short-term gains that come from cutting corners are not worth it in the long term for reputation.
Well, that is the easy part of this component. I think even the harder part of this component, that the regulation is still not perfect, and
Mm.
it's very different from country to country as well. So there are situations when you have to make a judgment call
Mhm.
because you don't have full information, and you cannot have full information. You just have to kind of say like, well, probably this is the best way to do it like that.
Mhm.
But we'll
Mhm.
find out for sure later.
Yeah. You kinda have to have a moral compass and a business hat and a solid communications hat as a leader in an agency. I'm curious, do you have any, like running your agency, do you have any sort of, internal like guiding principles or core values at Fortis Media that the team abides by or that you lean into when you're communicating and leading your team?
Absolutely. So we have five core values that we is a very center at the very center of what we do. We
Mm.
actually even have them on our coffee mugs right here in the office. It's blurred out, but it
Nice.
says curiosity,
Curiosity.
which is one of
Yeah,
them.
nice.
Yeah. The other one is trust, positivity, and purpose.
Cool. And how do those I mean, do you have a favorite child? Like a favorite one of those that you lean into more?
I think trust is very important.
Mhm.
Trust is very important to me, but I think, and we probably going to touch on that later on, I guess. But why agencies hire, why agencies kind of are able to lock the business, and why agencies lose the clients. So it's
Mm.
all about trust.
Mhm.
Because essentially, clients, there are two factors in your relationship with the client. There's this trust, and there's value delivery.
Mhm.
Everything else comes after that. But if you don't have, one of these two components, or if you don't have these two components, then there's no relationship. If there's no relationship, everything that you're doing right now with the partner is temporary, 100%.
Trust and value delivery. I love that those are two kind of pillars that encompass pretty much everything else in the agency. I mean, if you really think about it, it's a good way. And if you don't have the trust, then the relationship might not last long enough for the value delivery to catch up. Things don't always go as planned. We have Google updates, core updates, spam updates, all kinds of stuff that can throw our strategy off in those scenarios where things are out of your control and you aren't able to fulfill on the value delivery as you would like to for the client or maybe even as you've promised them. How do you communicate? How does that trust come into play? Like what's your playbook for dealing with rough seas with clients?
That's a good question, because if you go out there and you read surveys where different agencies or research agencies go out to potential clients and existing clients, and they ask one question: what is that you're missing the most in your relationship with your marketing agency? The first thing usually will be communication. Communication. So, and that is the number one thing that affects trust. If you're communicating, and then if you're communicating well, if you're communicating on time, if you're there for the client at all times, or at least most times, if you're transparent with your communication, there's going to be trust.
Mhm.
If those components are missing, then it's not a good communication anymore. And then, the trust might be affected.
Mhm. Mhm. So when you're talking communication with a client, are there specific guiding principles or core values around that I guess, more so like determine an action? How do you put those core values like trust and communication, and you said a few more. How do you put those into play?
You mean in communication,
Yeah,
like,
specifically.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's few things that are already mentioned about communication here, like transparency and whatnot. This is kind of how you present things.
Mhm.
Then, if we're talking about the curiosity, is the extra research or extra learnings that you have, or
Mhm.
extra to dos, for that to happen, you put that into the mix. Then purpose, like why are we doing this in the first place?
Mm.
What are we expecting from this? What is the expected value? What are the expected metrics, and how are we tracking towards that? So that is tied to purpose. And I think positivity, which is kind of interesting value that we have, but I think you got to stay positive at all times, and you got to, drive for the best outcome you can. And you have to believe that that outcome will happen. Obviously, you got to stay critical on the numbers and everything else you're doing, but you got to stay positive, and you got to have positive communication, because clients, they don't want to hear, that your cat died or something. They don't care about that. You
Mhm.
know, they want positivity, they want drive, they want energy from you. And this is what you
Yeah.
need to deliver.
Mm. I'm training for a half marathon right now, and part of my
Wow.
training is using the Nike Run app. And so I have one of the Nike coaches is like, working pushing me through my workout. And he said something interesting today on my training. He said, "I need you to push harder, but harder doesn't necessarily mean more effort. It could mean the same effort but with a positive perspective." And I thought that was
I
really
love
cool.
that.
I was like, yeah, we don't have to work harder. We just have to do the same, but communicating it with the understanding that in the future we are doing this for a purpose. Back to what you just said. So looking back, what growth channel or like service lines surprised you the most in terms of long-term impact for the business, for your agency?
That's an easy question. It's MarTech and analytics. It's down simply because I think that when we start things, we want results quickly, and we don't sometimes think about different outcomes that we might have. And I would say, like, well, if we're going to have some numbers, we're going to be fine.
Mhm.
Although we all learned that is tremendously wrong.
Mhm.
So we usually push very, very hard from the beginning of any project that we need to get tracking, analytics,
Mhm.
integrations right, and increasingly so the attribution now with the role of LLMs and everything else, the attribution right. Only then we can do what we agreed to do.
Mhm.
So MarTech as a whole.
What's your tech stack in terms of tracking? I mean, like, are you using agency analytics? Obviously, probably GA4, Screaming Frog for SEO. Yeah, give me kind of a rundown of the key MarTech.
So I think we use fairly standard stack, because this is, the most popular. Most people and companies are using that. So it's G4, DTM, mostly Google Stack, for analytics and tracking. But I think GA4 and installing GA4 is just like a 10% of the work
Mm,
of actually, having G4. I think the assumption out there is that I install the code and that's it. I have G4. It's running.
mm,
All good.
mhm,
Let's move on. However, it is just the beginning of the work. It's how you set the custom events, custom dimensions. How do you trigger those events in your website? How do you connect that with different sources of traffic? What sort of parameters do you have in those events and whatnot? That is the work done.
mm,
And all that needs to reflect the business logic of the client.
mm,
So, how do you actually work? What sort of real data is flowing all the time there? So,
mhm,
you embed that real life model inside the GA4, and then you can actually present those reports in a way that client can understand them,
mhm,
as opposed to tell them, like, oh, you had 100,000 sessions. Congratulations. And they're like,
mm.
okay, I guess.
Yeah, like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we're talking about client relationships right now. You have transparent communication. It's early, it's often, it's even consistent through the hard times, and especially through the hard times. I would imagine that that leads to a pretty high retention rate. Are there any other strategies that you use, like that you're specifically intentionally focused on, that you feel help retain clients for the agency?
So I'm just going to repeat myself there for the first part of the answer. So
Hmm.
trust and value delivery, these are still at the very center of everything. But
Hmm.
in addition to that is how do we onboard the client and how do we work with the client? And just to kind of add more specifics to that, our aim, at least aim with every client, is to be strategic advisor as opposed to the implementer or service provider. And we believe in that because of the two reasons. Number one, we believe that we can deliver much more value this way. And number two, this way we get to increase retention because we have a strategic association as opposed to service provider and the client, right?
Hmm.
And I'm talking about this from the positive side entirely because when you're in the center, when you're of the marketing strategy, you can advise on integration of different channels, on usage of different channels. You have access to more data from which you can drive more insight, as opposed to you just doing SEO.
Hmm.
But if you're not seeing anything else, and you're just doing SEO, and somebody else is doing PPC, somebody else is doing paid social, and all
Hmm.
of these are business organizations trying to maximize the value to the client, of course, but also to
Hmm.
themselves. How will your marketing strategy look like?
Hmm.
And how much of an insight I can give if I have, I don't know, 15% of the overall view of what's going on.
Hmm. Mm. So you're talking about expanding service lines, basically, right? You have the paid, you have the organic with SEO, and there's some affiliate marketing that you offer as well, I understand. But if you don't have those all under one roof, then you're missing a part of the picture, a large part of the picture, especially if you're only doing one. I would imagine that along with that transparent communication, the frequency of it, and seeing the whole picture, that has to translate, like you said, like who cares if we got 100,000 impressions last month? What does that mean? So how are you, in 2026, how are you reporting to clients on a monthly basis? Like what are you sharing with them? What KPIs? And I'm curious about what the formatting looks like.
It's a very good question because it relates actually to what we discussed about the GA4 as well. So
Mhm.
the key principle is that we want to report first and foremost the numbers that are meaningful and important to the client.
Mhm.
So if I'm working, I don't know, let's take an example like an e-commerce brand. They want sales. They want to sell stuff. And then they want
Mhm.
repeat sales. That's what they care about. If we're going to report them clicks and impressions, they're going to say like, yeah, great. But where's the value?
Yeah.
So with each client during onboarding process, we're talking to them like, what is your strategy? What are you looking to achieve in next quarter or by the end of the year? How do you measure that? Okay, so you're measuring, let's say, sales, or you measure in iGaming. It's usually players, first-time depositors, or registrations, insurance. This is like policies sold, or besides this policies. Like every business usually has something that is important that they talk about in their weekly meetings. And when we report, we want to be talking same language as they talk in their weekly meetings.
Speaking in the same language is what I
Absolutely.
got out of this. Yeah. Yeah. And then when you're showing, those GA4 reports, I would imagine that you're telling some sort of a story like, hey, website traffic dropped. However, sales went up. So you got like random numbers, right? Website traffic dropped by 20%. However, the number of sales increased by 20%. However, the first time depositors deposited 15% less than they normally would. I would imagine with those sort of numbers in and of themselves, they could produce a yay or a huh response, but altogether, you have a much more comprehensive understanding. That sort of a storytelling, approach is easier to do with visuals. Are you using like graphs, spreadsheets or flowcharts? Like, is it a presentation? I guess what's the tactical presentation look like?
So we try to, in order to do what you just described,
Hmm.
We're trying to marry the data from different sources
Hmm.
and then tell a story from different angles.
Hmm.
Because usually, one data source doesn't tell the full story. We know that from experience. So what we do, we have all the sources, G4, Search Console, then depending, could be Google Ads or could be RTB or whatever. We push all that into data warehouse, which runs on Snowflake.
Hmm.
Then on top of Snowflake, we have Power BI from Microsoft. And
Hmm.
there we have dashboards. And in those dashboards, well, actually under those dashboards, there's a data model that's right there. And it has different relationships between different sources for the data that's in the data warehouse. So these dashboards, they are already showing us a very holistic view of what's going on, which we then either put on screen during client meetings, or we're just going to put them on in the good old fashioned PowerPoint.
Nice. And then the idea is obviously to keep a pulse, keep the client informed, and then I would imagine that you would take some sort of, next steps after presenting and say like, knowing everything that we know now, here are the corrections, here are the adjustments that we're making, and then therefore probably set up the next plan, the next month, the next quarter with them. You've talked before about having a defensive SEO strategy, especially in iGaming. What does a defensive SEO strategy look like?
So, well, in a nutshell, it's keeping what you have. But if I had to kind of break it down a little bit more, it's about identifying the most valuable items that you have. So, for instance, if we're iGaming brand, which of the pages are most valuable in terms of ranking, keywords, and whatnot? Usually, we see that from experience that the most valuable rankings are the ones that exist for commercial pages. So for commercial money pages or conversion pages.
Hmm.
If you have that, this is the first thing you want to protect. Then when it comes to content, which content pieces drive value? Is it scalable or is it not? If it
Mm.
is, how it can scale. How we can scale by keeping quality, authority, and all the EAT stuff in there, and then managing risk is just like what's going to happen. Like if we're talking about defensive SEO strategy, we need to know from which risks we're defending it. Is it the
Mm.
competitors that they're doing something? Is it the algorithm updates that we see some sort of vectors of where they're moving? Because we see those vectors. I mean, they're pretty obvious. Maybe details are not so obvious, but the vector is quite obvious, right? So once you identify that, then you go back to the things that I mentioned before and you put those in like sort of like a defensive plan in a way or something, and then you
Mhm.
have a defensive strategy.
Mm. Yeah, I really got which risks are we defending against? I think that was a key point for me, like identifying, is it a competitor? Is it a core update? And then developing strategies. And the answer is the typical SEO answer, like it always depends. But just by having those clarities, you can start to build that sort of a bubble around the nucleus, which is, the core business. Speaking of things changing all the time, AI coming into play, I call it the post AI SEO era instead of trying to decide on which acronym is, going to be the acronym of the day. How do you currently evaluate? Well, let me pause before we go into that. In at DWS, majority of our business is link building and building relationships with quality publishers. How do you currently evaluate link quality when authority metrics like DR, DA, website traffic, those alone are no longer reliable indicators of the impact of the link? So what do you look at for determining quality links?
Even before this period or this era, we were looking at more than that, and I'm sure as you guys are doing the same thing. So
Mhm.
you look at the basics there, the stuff that you mentioned, but
Mhm.
also you look at the content of the website. Like
Mhm.
what is it about? Is it concentrated on one topic or is it talking about everything?
Mhm.
Usually they call it like lifestyle websites, right? Then you look at what are the EAT signals that you can find on there? Do they have like real writers? Do they have writer profiles that are linked to their, I don't know, LinkedIn or X or
Mhm.
whatever? So then you see what kind of links do they have to their own sites. And so you evaluate all that, and then you make a final decision. I I'd say that some of those metrics that we're used to, they're still somewhat relevant, but they're no longer sufficient to make a final determination. But they're still, I think, a good starting point, especially if we're talking about super high quality stuff when we're have, DR 60, 80 and higher.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a lot of the agencies that I'm talking to, they're constantly trying to find ways that they can implement AI to get higher quality links. But what we found, and we have a team of over 400 people, and we build several thousand links a month, almost 10,000 links a month. We use quite a bit of AI. We actually have a SaaS company that does research, and it's kind of like a rank tracking tool, but we still have humans in the loop multiple times during the process just to make sure that the numbers that we're seeing on the screen from Ahrefs or wherever else we're getting the data isn't being manipulated behind the scenes in some way. We still have people that go into the website, look at the website, get a feel for it. Like, is this a lifestyle website or is it like a niche? And then how niche is it? Is one of the metrics that we look at, because what we're finding, and maybe you could share a little bit about what's coming up for you in terms of LLM visibility, as well as compared to AI overviews and SERP visibility, but contextual relevance, niche relevance of the site compared to our target URL is becoming more and more important. And actually, like the more niche sites, even if they have lower metrics than, let's say, some of the higher traditional metrics, if we can get a good placement in a niche site that's trusted in a smaller circle, those are tending to show up and produce more visibility in LLMs. I'm curious what you're seeing.
Agree with you 100%. I agree with you 100%. And to achieve that, which was the first part of the question, is
Hmm.
our strategy is to exclude fast. And this is
Mm,
where we use AI. So we have
hmm.
a AI models that analyze thousands and thousands of different sites. And then we're looking for the objective reason for them to be excluded, whether it may
Mm,
be differences, different too many different topics. AI can tell, like, look, this site is about everything, so we don't want it.
hmm.
Or it's about one thing and it has a lot of stuff on that thing. So, you know, for instance, I love cars. I'm a car guy. And
Mm,
so if I find a site about sort of rally cars or something, I know
hmm.
that they are going to go deep on that. And I think if I were to do SEO on sort of correlated business, I would
Hmm.
love to be featured on that website, because I'm sure it doesn't matter whether it's Google or LLM crawler or whatnot. I will definitely get that positive signal
Hmm.
of authority and trust from that kind of site. It doesn't matter, whether it's Google or
Hmm.
LLM.
Yeah, looking for the signal through the noise. And yeah, we haven't quite figured out, AI is great and there's a bunch of different workflows and tools that we can use, but it's still a little ways off from human discernment in terms of taste and niche. So that car analogy with rally cars is a really great example. Justinas, as we wrap up our time here, is there anything that we should have talked about but we haven't yet?
Just one thing, really. It's the AI overviews,
Mm,
and there's a lot of like stress about that.
mm,
I constantly get these questions like about sort of, our informational queries, no clicks on that, no clicks at
mhm,
all. I think on Monday, Butters Institute, part of Oxford University, they released a publisher's survey results where they asked biggest publishers in the world like Condé Nast and others about what they expect. The answer was that they expect around 40% reduction in traffic from search uh, because of AI overviews.
mm,
But I think why we're not looking at that in the right way is that we don't use the term assisted conversion often enough.
hmm. What's that?
So if you have a conversion, and so if the user clicks on Google ad and then buy something from you, in the
Mhm,
last click attribution, you're going to say like, the channel that did that is Google Ads. That's it. Don't care about anything else,
mhm,
right? But many different brands, they will not check whether that person maybe saw a banner, maybe engaged on YouTube, maybe watched some
mhm,
videos, maybe he was on the site before. Is the keyword that he converted on through Google Ads was a branded keyword or not?
mhm,
And we need to, once we're kind of doing the attribution, we need to assign certain weight for every touch point, and only then determine, what this conversion is truly driven by.
Mm,
And I think when we're talking about the LLMs, so what? Like these informational queries that people used to click on, most of them did not convert anyway. And these
right.
people, they never came back to the site anyway. They just got the thing that we're looking for. So it's all about intent, really. So
Mm,
what my key point here is, let's not worry about too much because the value is not gone. It just was redistributed. And we got to adapt to that new model and we're going to be okay.
mm. Weights, I just wrote down assigning weights by touch point because you're right that assisted conversion is no longer last touch attributable. I suppose. Out of my own curiosity, is there a way that you're able to see like per this market segment? Let's say the people who are converting, the customers are who are converting are on average targeted and they see X number of ads, they search X number of times, and they maybe have contact with high number of banners before they convert. Like, is there sort of a holistic overview of like touch points and then the weights associated with those? Like, do you have that sort of a number per segment?
So there are kind of very advanced ways of doing that and simpler ways
Hmm.
because we're wrapping up. So the simplest way is that GA4 it tracks some of the assisted points automatically based on refer that people come to your site from. So this
Hmm.
is this is where I would start. That's just an analyze the user journey and what refers there were. Did they come from search? Did they come from ads? Did they come from certain referral or whatnot? And then kind of use the data driven attribution to dynamically assign the weights to all of those. Google
Mm,
J4 does that automatically. So that's where I would start from. Of course, there are advanced setups where you can integrate all the data that you have from the RTB, from other tools that you use redirectors, pixels, and then try to identify whether it's the same user through like encrypted emails and
mm,
whatnot. Regulatory issues comes into that, mostly in Europe because of the GDPR, but we know that GDPR in its different form of shape, that's getting exported to other countries. Maybe
mm,
not in a such extent as it is, but we know that in California there's data privacy things are happening
hmm.
and so on. So this is a big challenge, but the rewards from that are massive.
Yeah, I love it. And I wish we had more time to go into the complicated answer. So thank you for keeping that short and sweet from us. Justinas, where can we find out more about you and about Fortis Media?
On our website, www.fortismedia.com, on our website. Also, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search by my name.
Cool. Yeah, sounds good. And we will include those in the show notes here if people want to reach out to you and talk more about these attribution models that you're working on, as well as like a holistic view of even how to report to a client. I think all that is very helpful. So thank you for joining me, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, Austin. Good to be here.